Welcome to What's New in AutoCAD Plant 3D 2021. My name's Lindsay Smith. I'm an AEC sales consultant involved in the business development side. I've been with Pentagon Solutions for 2 years, helping push the adoption of these technologies across Ireland and the UK. I like building relationships with my clients and providing the help and advice and products they need to help their business grow. The main element of today's presentation will be conducted by James Heron. He's our senior BIM consultant. He's spent a lot of time on projects working one-to-one with clients to develop their workflow and best practice to manage their projects. He's a wealth of experience in all the AutoCAD AEC products. And some of the sectors that he's worked in, he's worked with major construction companies, biomedical and pharma, and of course those people involved in semiconductor production. So that's who you've got working with you today. Okay, I just want to give you a brief outline of who Pentagon are and what we do before we move into the main presentation, just in case of any of you don't know. We were established 18 years ago and operate across the whole of Ireland and the UK. We have 4 directors. You can see the wee men in black there looking slightly suspicious. But they've actually got a wealth of experience. They hate it when I say this because combined they've got over 100 years experience in the construction sector, trained engineers and a wealth of experience. So, you know, in addition to software, we have a range of services that can help your business grow, and that's why we've got the wee graphic on the right there. You know, we're looking at consultancy, support and general help, so to make sure that you get your best from the business. Okay. Now, this is looking at a little bit more detail about what we do and the last section that I touched on there. If you start in the top right of the slide, you can see what we mainly do is Autodesk. We're an Autodesk reseller and Gold Partner. We're an authorised training centre. Most of our training is CPD certified, so a wealth of experience to offer in there. I'm moving around a little bit to 20 past. We're also BIM consultants. Provide you with a full range of BIM consultancy services, and we're BSI accredited, so we can help with all your systems and procedures through to full ISO 19650 accreditation. Really some experienced guys there that know what they're doing. Also, our support packages, you know, we're tailored. We're not one of those places that just dump you with your software and then get up and go. We really are here to help your business grow and support your business. Another range of products that we don't just do Autodesk, as some of you already know. We sell Accruent products, Meridian database management systems, and we've recently moved into the Kai Cloud and maintenance connection products too. So do reach out if you require any information on those. And coming back up to 12 o'clock, it's sort of sitting there, that wee logo, looking a bit innocuous, but it's one of my favourite things. It's Pentagon Construction Intelligence. It's recently been developed by ourselves, and it's a bespoke analytics package. It generates reporting data from individual user level across all platforms. So it's really good at pinpointing the information that you need when you need it. It's totally bespoke to you. We can customize the reports to give you the information that you want when you need it. So if you're interested in looking at consolidating your construction data so that you're getting the best use from your software and from your processes, please do reach out to us and we're more than happy to talk to you about that. Okay, moving on again. A little bit more, I sort of whizzed over support before, but it's something that's really important to us. You know, our support packages and the systems that we have in place, we actually view as business support. We're not just here, oh, you know, my software's broke, can you get it back up and running? We do that, of course, and we've got various formats to do that. You can reach out to our electronic system, just work through the chat bots. You can do by email, you can speak to one of our technical engineers. You know, there's a fully operational ticketing system to monitor what usage you're getting from it, so that's all in place. But what we also do is you know, we want to help your business. So if you want a support package that includes maybe how-to questions, you know, I'm not quite sure what to do with this model, how do I make that interact with that? You know, we can provide you a level of support that helps with that and gives you access to that technical expertise rather than just making sure that your software is up and running. We can also provide a range of solutions to help you with projects. If you have a big project on and you just need a hand with modelling or something like that, we're more than happy to jump in and help you with that. So our support is, you know, it's something that little bit extra. You know, project configuration and setup, help with all that as well. So if there's something that you think you might need there, something to help your business, help you with a certain project, please do reach out to us and we'll do our best for you. Okay, coming into the nitty-gritty now, and let's have a look at what we're going to do today. Obviously, you've had me talking at you for the past few minutes. Today is going to be a mix of chat, demos and recorded material, and we're hoping to be done in about the half an hour mark. So you can see there what we're hoping to cover today. If we start at the top, James is going to take you through Plant 3D, highlight the unique features of it within the Autodesk portfolio. We're then going to move on and he's going to look at some existing workflows between AutoCAD, Plant P&ID and Plant 3D. And demonstrate how those workflows are interacting with the BIM 360 and Revit platforms at the moment and what we're looking to achieve going forward. So that all sounds completely lovely. But there is a section on the bottom there. There are limitations with the software. You know, nothing's perfect. If everything worked completely brilliantly out of the box, we'd all be well away. But there are some key points that you need to take on board when you're looking at setting up your projects with Plant 3D, and some limitations that you need to be aware of to help you manage things, and to make sure that you get the best from the systems, and you're getting what you need from it in the correct way. Save you time and money in the end. We're then going to look at a little question and answer session at the end. So if there's anything that comes up during the presentation or anything that you've already got, please do feel free to participate, and James will help you with all those questions. I'm actually going to pass over to James now, and we can get through the rest of the presentation and you can have a look at what you really came for.
Thanks, Lindsay. Just one last point on the Q&A. If anybody does have any questions, I think everybody's muted at the minute, so if you do have any questions that you want to sort of talk about at the end, feel free to put them in. You should all have access to a Q&A panel in your interface. So let me just go back a slide. So yeah, what I wanted to do was run through a sort of a brief history of Plant, how Plant has kind of arrived at its position, and how it kind of compare and contrast it with other platforms that most people are using in industry. I think Revit gets a lot of press time, and I just wanted to highlight some similarities and differences between things like Plant and Revit, and then how the two applications are really now talking together. So what I wanted to start with is, for the uninitiated, this is a high level, very quick overview. Plant actually comes as two applications sort of merged into one. So we've got P&ID and we've got Plant 3D. So I'm going to start with the P&ID side of things. And the key thing with Revit, with Plant 3D, is that it's data driven, like other BIM authoring applications. These are objects. We're placing schematic objects that represent real world components. But when I place an object, I tag it. It's been given a unique tag, but if I try to copy that same object multiple times, it's smart enough to know it doesn't behave just like a regular AutoCAD block, despite the interface. I copy an object multiple times, it gives me a question mark, prompting me that these tags should be unique, and because I've copied them, they're not unique. So the database backend to Plant 3D is critical, and then when I change the tag, the object updates, or if I change the object, the tag updates. So those two things are combined pretty much in the same way that anybody familiar with Revit would behave. What you're looking at isn't text, this is an annotation that's being driven by the data that lives within the objects themselves. So it's a data-driven system. Similarly, if we're managing our annotation can be moved independently from the objects if needs be. But the relationship between the object and the annotation is still maintained. So if we move the object, the annotation moves with it. So it's fairly straightforward. So we're going to add in some more components. So we're going to add in another piece of equipment, say a tank, which is going to route between a pump and a tank. So we're going to tag this as well. We're going to add some more annotation again, different type of tag this time. I'm going to place that just above the tank. So then we want to route between these two components with a line. So it's smart enough to know these aren't like regular polylines. If I route from A to B, it does a couple of things. That's a single line, but it creates an automatic nozzle when I try to interact the line with the pump, and I can swap that nozzle out to different type of nozzle. So all these types that I'm talking about, they're all referred to in Plant as object classes. And that's really important. So it's basically categorizing all the object types that we want to use. So same as all the other components, we can take that line and we can add some properties in against it and give it a unique tag. So this is a default project. So we're using sort of default settings, and we've got, you can see the size and spec have been set based on what we were previously using. So I'm going to set the size to 2 inch. I'll leave the spec as it is. I'm going to pick a service. This is important because this information becomes usable downstream, and we're going to give it a line number. So just 100. And we're going to tag it again, just the annotation. Place that. Okay, so like everything else, that's just a representation of the properties that's inside the object. And we're going to repeat that. Slight mistake there, so just go back and do it again. So if we route that, so remember it's taken some properties that are already set up at the top of the screen there. So it's a 10-inch CS150 flange line. So those properties will already be populated, but I can change those at any time. And I can change them downstream as well, which I'll show you later. So we're going to keep the service the same. We're going to keep giving it a line number 100A just because it's a branch off that main line. I'm going to change the size to 1 inch. So lastly, what we want to do is add in a couple of inline components. So we've got a set of different valve types, different symbols for different types of valves, gate valves, ball valves. So we're going to add in a gate valve to the 2 inch line, and you'll see what it does. It inherits the size of the line when it's added in. So it's not like a regular block. And again, the tag, if we wanted to edit that, we can change the code to something more specific. So we know it's a gate valve. And we're going to repeat that on the 1 inch line, just so you see the differences. So that's a 1 inch ball valve. But the tag that, you see how the tags are forced to be unique. So we've got valve 101 and valve 102 effectively. And we can see when we hover on the lines that everything is connected. What's really important is in the background, if we open up a data manager, this is a view into the database that's being compiled as we route. You can kind of see there's each line with the properties of the line, where we're routing from, what object we're routing from, what piece of equipment we're routing to. And this is all editable. We can update those properties inside the data manager as well. So that's our stage 1. Stage 2 then is really what we can do with that P&ID now that we have it. So a couple of years ago, Autodesk tried to build a better bridge between the P&ID and the Plant 3D. So I'm just highlighting, I've made a few changes to some of those lines in advance. So I've set a 4 inch CS300 as my defaults. So I've opened up this P&ID line list. And I can see each line, I can see the components that are attached to each line. Now there's a bit of configuration that has to be done in the background to get this to work, but if I right click on the line and say I want to place it, I want to route from this pump to this tank, this nozzle on this tank. So 2 clicks and we're routed, but the important thing is there that the line properties that were in the schematic, just give it a second, the properties come up, the line properties, so the spec, the size, the line number, and the service, it's just at the bottom there, are all carried across. I don't have to re-tag the line, the work's already been done for me. And we can repeat that on the 100A line as well. So right click, place item, and route from the second pump. We're going to come up 3 feet, I think. So I've deliberately made this a imperial P&ID sort of plant project, just so you can kind of see some of the subtleties when we move into an imperial setup in Revit. There's the line has been routed, and again, all the properties should be carried across. So when we place the valves on the appropriate lines, what we should be able to see is that the properties, again, the size, the spec, and the tag have all been copied across from the P&ID that we set up at the start. So this is, I'm not going to win any awards for modeling pipes, but the next downstream activity we really want to be looking at is taking the model that we produced and running an isometric from that. So if we quickly run that, I'll just sort of shorten the setup. Nobody wants to sit and wait a minute for that to work. So once our isometrics produce, very quickly we've gone from routing a schematic line to routing a 3D model from that schematic, and now we've produced an isometric with a full bill of materials on a single sheet, all automated. All the items listed out, quantities, cut pieces. We can see our schematic representation of our nozzles and connectors and what we're connecting to, our coordinates, our inline components, dimensions to those components. So that is, in a nutshell, that's the full workflow from P&ID through to isometric, all within Plant 3D. So I'm stepping back a bit. This is more looking ahead onto how Plant has evolved. So what I wanted to focus on initially was how Revit has evolved and the different options that are available for when people want to share models and share files using Revit. So our most basic setup, what a lot of people would probably start with, is we have a single user, we have a single file or a single model, and that's our level of interaction. That's keeping it quite simple, and everybody operating on a single network. Those are the 3 fundamental components, and everything you'll see from here on is really just a variation of that. We're changing one of those variables. We're adding more users, we're adding more models, or we're adding more networks. So our next level up, we might have multiple users. We can still keep it simple. We can have a one-to-one relationship between a user and a model. But what we have to do then is we reference in other people's models into our own model so we can kind of get better visibility on what's happening. So that's one version of a sort of a model volume strategy that can be adopted quite simply. The point is we're still on a single network. We haven't sort of moved off a single network yet. Then moving ahead, we have same idea, multiple users, but this time we're trying to leverage a single model, and we're using a concept called work sharing. So that's where a central model is stored in a location and users get copies of local files to work on, and everything is communicated through that central model. Again, the limitation here is we're still operating on the basis of a single network. So when we want to work over a more distributed base, so we have multiple offices and multiple locations, this is where our cloud work shared model comes in. So we have multiple users again. We have a single file or model, but this time it's hosted in BIM 360, or it's a cloud work shared model. And we have people in a more distributed setup, so we're on what's called a wide area network. We're working across multiple sites. So the concepts are the same as a work shared model on a local area network. It's just we're leveraging the cloud to share that data between the multiple users on different sites. So the reason I'm highlighting this is so we can explain a bit better as to what is happening with Plant 3D. So to date, our collaboration options have been quite limited, and part of that, the reason for that is because Plant is a bit more complex about what's going on behind the scenes. So just to give you a better visibility on that, what we have by default, when we create a project, we have multiple databases set up inside our project, and the default setting for that is a SQLite database. We have drawings that belong in that project, and we have specs that are used in that project, and those specs are created from catalogs. Anybody who's used Plant 3D to date should be familiar with these concepts. And the relationship between these are catalogs feed our specs feed our drawings, and our drawings communicate with our databases. Everything within that red box is what would be defined in a default project setup. And this is important, that red box, I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation, just to highlight a couple of points. That project setup is the default. Everything lives within a sort of a defined folder structure. We have users who want to interact with those drawings and edit them, and everything lives on a single network, much the same way as we were talking about with Revit. Now, the change that's happened in the last couple of years is that workflow between the P&ID database and the piping, the 3D database, which I just highlighted in the workflows previously. But that's a sort of a small step forward, an integration within Plant 3D itself. The challenge we found is that we have all those elements. Every project needs all those elements. The size of that red box can change because I can define my databases can be SQL Server. They can live outside the project. My specs, I can share those across multiple projects. They can live outside the project structure. And my catalogs also can be distributed or shared. But my challenge has always been everything lives on a single network to date. So how is that changing for now? So the big change that's happened in 2021 has been the introduction of this collaboration project. So what I'm showing you is a single network with a project that's been set up on that network. What we can do is we can share that project and the project structure with BIM 360. And then we can replicate that project across multiple sites. So we can have multiple users on multiple sites accessing a project across BIM 360. What's important is that sort of sharing this, and again, this has been a feature that's been around for a couple of years, but it's worth highlighting again for those who aren't aware, but that now sort of allows users to leverage P&ID data in Revit via BIM 360. So I'm going to cover two key workflows now. First one is what we have to do to get our project up in the cloud. So this is the project we were working on. So quite simply, what we have to do, I've changed some of the tags again just to make it simpler. So we have a collaborate tab at the top, and we have a share project function. So simply click on that so that up to now everything is local on my machine. So we're being prompted to close the files. So everything is closed down. We have to tell it where we want to save the project in BIM 360. So we're going to pick a BIM 360 project. And we're going to upload the project. Now I've sped up some of this process because it does take, I think when I timed this, it took about just over a minute to do it. So what's happening is it's pushing all the files, that's the drawings, all the project XMLs, the specs, everything that belongs inside that project is now being pushed up into BIM 360. And then it's going to be pulled back down again onto my machine, but it's the equivalent of my local version of the project. And you'll see the interface will change slightly in that. So let's jump ahead. So when we're done we're prompted to then set up our permissions. Who do we want access to have the project? And you'll see down in our bottom left-hand corner, the paths for the files have changed. And we were getting some more additional information on the project in that view as well. So we'll come back to that towards the end. So now what can we do with the project now that it's in BIM 360? So the first thing is we can leverage that P&ID data. So again, this P&ID modeler has been around for a couple of years. So we open it, it'll go to our account, load in any projects that have Plant 3D projects within them. And I'm just going to close this down for a second to go back. So when we first open this up, we will be presented with all the DWGs that are inside that project. And when we select a DWG, we can see the lines that are inside. We're given a view of the model initially when we select on it. It's just giving us a preview now. What will happen is when we select the line, it will zoom to that line and give us a preview in that window. Okay, so we're seeing exactly what we can see in P&ID. So I'm going to select the 100 line. The difference here is that it's given me equipment and lines, whereas in the P&ID it was only giving me lines and inline components. So if I select the pump, start off with, sorry, let's go back a step. What's important is that we've gone through a process to map components, system to systems, objects to objects, object class to object families, and for properties to come across, we've also mapped those. So we've created a shared property in Revit, and that's going to be mapped to the tag property in the P&ID components. So when we tag components, we're going to see that now in Revit. So we'll go back, we're going to add in the tank first. So I'm going to drop that in. Now this is a metric system, these are all metric components, so you'll see the reason why I'm using that in a second. So we're going to select our tank. You'll see it's a 65mm diameter rather than a 2-inch, which is what this is expecting. And you'll see the tag has come across from the P&ID. And then we're going to place our other pump. I'm only doing this in 3D, so it makes it easier to see. So then we're going to pick our lines. I'm going to start with our 2-inch line. We'll route from A to B. Now, a couple of things you'll see on the right that we're being told there's something different between the P&ID and the Revit. Now that's the difference is it's a 2-inch line in the P&ID, it's a 65mm. It's not technically 2-inch, but that's because we don't have a 2-inch line set up in this particular project. But that's fine, it'll let us, let's pick the next size up, next available size up. Similarly, when we drop in our gate valve, the tag is coming across. Again, it's giving us a warning because the sizes aren't exactly matching. But once we've routed all the components, we can see in the P&ID modeler that that line is completely solid green. We can jump to the 2-inch line. Sorry, the 1-inch line. We'll repeat that, drop the pump in. And route the lines. And we're going to add in our ball valve. So I think the difference with the P&ID modeler in Revit is it gives you better visibility on which components have been modeled, and it sort of validates it as you proceed. But again, we're getting our tags across. One thing I should point out is that the line tags that were in the P&ID aren't being carried across because Revit has no capacity to map those lines. Okay, so once we're done, you'll see that the the green box under pipelines is fully is solid, which tells us that all our lines have been routed. And just to give you an idea of what's going on behind the scenes, so now that our project is hosted in BIM 360, it's not just the drawing files, it's the drawing files and all the supporting files that go with it. So everything is now version controlled, and everything is, so any changes are required to any aspect of the project will be version controlled and protected like any other file. So there's our P&ID drawing and our Plant 3D drawing. Now, I would emphasize it's probably not best to, once these are in BIM 360, if you want to go in and view them, fine, but I wouldn't be doing any changes in there. Our interface has changed. We now get these new symbols beside our components inside our project. So anybody who's familiar with Vault should sort of understand what these concepts are. So when we go to edit a file, we need to check the file out. We need to take ownership of it. Even simple things like editing the project, we're being prompted that we need to check out certain files before we can edit the project. So even changes to the projects will be tracked and version controlled in BIM 360. Okay, so everything should be the same, but you'll see that our paths have been updated. So these are the local paths for my local project. Things like our plant content folder are still controlled outside of BIM 360. Okay, so we jump back to BIM 360 again. So what we're doing is before I get started, just to flag the collaboration options. By default, a check-in will occur every time I save a drawing. Now that's probably not desirable. So what I'm doing here is making sure that I'm changing it. So check-in will only occur when the drawing is closed at the end, and I can prompt it to be manually as well. I can also control where I want my local project to live. If I leave that option open, what will happen is every time I hit save, it'll hang for a couple of seconds while it synchronizes with BIM 360, which I probably don't want to do. So I'm going to open the file. As I open it, it checks it out. So that means that other people get visibility on that I'm working on the file, regardless of where they are. I'm going to go in and just make a very quick change to the file. Just accept that. And yeah, when I'm done, what I'm going to do is check it back in again. Now I'm going to check it in, but I want to keep working on it. The point of me checking it in just gives other people visibility on the work that I've done to date. I want people to be aware of that. So what should happen in the background then is it's going to push the file up to BIM 360, and then it's going to copy it back down again onto my machine. So you can kind of get an idea of how long each one of those interactions is going to take, and that's going to depend on the size of the file as well. But when we're done, we can see in BIM 360 that that file is now sitting at version 2. So when we're done, we've done all the edits to the file, we want to close the project down. So what it'll do is it'll prompt us, some of the projects, some of the files are open, save them. What it'll do is it'll synchronize our entire project back up again with BIM 360. So this is the thing to be aware of. This synchronization process might start to take a long time depending on how your options are set up and depending on how many files and things you have. So key takeaway for today is I'm just reminding you, this is the default project structure. This particular workflow, when we're sharing projects with BIM 360, it will only work providing our project structure follows these rules. So it's a SQLite. our drawings and our specs are all set up inside the project as a default. The consequence there is if you currently have your project set up any other way than the default, then you'll need to consider another approach to how you manage specs that are shared between projects and catalogs that are shared between sites, things like that. So that's a consideration you need to take on board. The time to synchronize project files between sites will obviously depend on the size and the number of files and the databases, size of the databases that you're using. So more files equals bigger database equals longer synchronization time. And I would also review those configure check-in options to make sure that you're optimizing your synchronization times. So that's the technical side of things complete. I'm just going to hand back to Lindsay. She's going to take you through a couple of slides to close out when we do Q&A at the end. Lindsay.
Hiya, thanks so much, James. Interesting, lots going on there. Nice to see the upgrades, and anything that makes collaboration easier is always beneficial. But as James said there, you need to make sure everything's set up properly so that you're getting the maximum from that. Okay, moving on a second. Okay, just wanted to put that up so you can take a wee note, take a wee snip or whatever, and make sure that you've got all our contact details there. And a couple of things I want to mention in closing. I mean, obviously we've been talking today about changes to the 2021 version. So it's really important to remember compliance with your Autodesk products, and it's crucial that any old projects and things that you've still got sitting around in 2017, remember that version's no longer valid. So once you've got your 2021 up and running, and we're in 2021 now, you need to be moving away from those 2017 versions as soon as possible. Really important that you do that. We don't want you getting caught out with any compliance. And of course, if you need any help with that, reach out to us. We're more than happy to come and assist you with that. Like I've said, and I said at the beginning, and I hope James has shown there, I certainly found it really interesting, and he definitely proved that what I said, that he knows what he's talking about. We're here to help you and your business get the best from your software. Please do get in touch if there's anything we can help with, and especially ensuring that your setup's correct. I can see, James, already that there's some Q&As come in if you want to start having a look at those. So let's just move into the Q&A session and see what everybody has for us.
Yeah, so a couple of questions from Joe. Does the P&ID modeler only work in a single direction from Plant 3D to Revit? Does a change in Revit update back in Plant 3D? The answer is no. There's no change. It's one direction. Yeah, I mean, technically, what you're doing in Revit is downstream from P&ID. So if you have changes in P&ID, will be reflected in the P&ID interface in Revit, and then you'll be flagged that there's an inconsistency between the Revit model and the P&ID. But no, it's not a reverse. It doesn't happen between Revit and Plant 3D. Hopefully that answers your question. And yeah, the other question you've asked is, have you modeled this twice, both in Plant and Revit? Do the 3D components not transfer over to Plant? Yeah, so the question is, do the 3D components not transfer from Plant to Revit? So this is, again, what Autodesk have done is they've given you two routes to go from your P&ID. You can go from P&ID to Revit, or you can go from P&ID to Plant 3D. There is no workflow that I'm aware of that allows me to go from Plant 3D to Revit. We do know some useful workflows that you can use to optimize that process, but it is effectively, if you have something modeled in Plant 3D, you would be tracing it over again in Revit or vice versa. So I'm hoping that, yeah, so Joe's happy with that. So does anybody else have any questions? You want to put them into the chat? Nope, so I don't think we have anything else. Nothing pending, Lindsay, so if you want to just close out.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks so much for attending today. There's our contact details again if you need anything else. And hope you enjoyed it. One of the things we do often do is we usually follow up these sessions with live seminars. So there'll probably be one of those coming a little later in the year. Keep an eye out for that. And we look forward to seeing you all again. Any questions or queries, anything you need to know about the software or helping with projects, please do get in touch with us. Thank you.